From the lakes of northern Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. Wherever fish are biting, that's where we're gonna go. There's a lot of exciting country just waiting to be explored. So join us now in the great outdoor world of Virgil Ward.
That song really brings back a lot of memories. Sunday afternoon, sitting around the supper table with the family and watching Virgil Ward fish all around the world. I'm Dan Galusha, and the lifetime accomplishments of Virgil Ward is the epitome of the great American dream. Just think about it. This man started from humble beginnings and became a legend in the sport fishing industry by just doing what came naturally to him, being himself. So join us now for the world of Virgil Ward.
On June 25, 1902, William Sevier Ward married Pearl Florence Wright in Texarkana, Arkansas. After moving to Easton, Missouri, the couple was blessed with a son, Virgil, on May 25, 1911. Virgil's mother introduced him to fishing.
I started fishing young. My mother loved to fish. She'd take me fishing when I was only about 4 or 5 years old. I caught my first fish on a string and a willow limb and a hook and a piece of bread, I think it was. I caught a little chub, about 6 inches long. I thought, man, I really did something there. It looked like a whale to me, a 6-inch chub.
Virgil's father had a good business with a cider and sawmill. The business was traded in 1927 for a 120-acre farm located 2.5 miles from Amsterdam, Missouri. His father purchased cattle at $300 each. The Depression hit, and the price of cattle dropped to $30 per head. Because of the move, Virgil had to miss a year of school. In 1928, he started as a sophomore in Amsterdam High School. The family was extremely poor.
You know, it was just hard to make a buck then. And in fact, I think I worked for $1 a day during that time. Things were rough. I was going to school and was lucky to have enough clothes to wear to go to school.
Many times, Virgil and his brothers and sisters didn't attend school because they had to work. When Virgil did go to school, he would walk nearly 3 miles. His competitive spirit is shown throughout his life. While attending Amsterdam High School, he was the county champion for 3 years in track. He was never beaten in any running or standing broad jump competition. He also competed in the discus throw and pole vault and was the leader of the basketball team. When asked about his favorite subjects, Virgil jokingly says geometry and girls. Maybe that's why he was called a sheik in his high school yearbook. Although Cleta Irene Thornbrough, who was called the prettiest girl in school, attended the same high school, Virgil did not meet her there. Their meeting took place during one of Amsterdam's weekly band concerts. The meeting eventually resulted in Virgil and Cleta's wedding on December 3, 1933. Virgil was 22 and Cleta was 21. They were so poor that they could not afford a wedding photo.
There was some times it was we were hard up. We, of course, grew up in the Depression, you know, and that was hard. But all in all, we've had a good life.
Their first child, Bill, was born in 1934. They also have 3 daughters, Barbara, Karen, and Sandy, 9 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. Virgil started a plumbing shop in 1950 in Amsterdam. To supplement his income, he also sold appliances. In 1955, Virgil and his son Bill started the Bassbuster Lure Company and patented the fiber weed guard. This weed guard revolutionized the weedless jig and is still used today. However, it was the feather jig that was the first big success of the company.
And we started making wooden lures. It didn't pay too well because it took so many coats of paint to preserve the lure that it cost so much that we couldn't make any profit on it, so we had to discard that. Later, we went to the feathered lures, long about the time that Bull Shoals was in its prime. And Bill, my son Bill and I were down there fishing one time, and we got into those big old slab-sided bass, great big ones. And we caught almost our limit. And here came a boat, and a guide was standing up in the back, and one of them was Judge Green from Springfield, Missouri, and the judge, he just couldn't believe that we'd caught that many big bass. He said the largest bass he'd ever caught in his life was a 4-pounder, and wondered what we was catching them on, and we showed him, and he said, well, would you sell us some? I said, well, we don't have but 2 or 3, and Bill doesn't have his limit yet. And about that time, he caught his limit, sitting there looking at him, you know. And so we gave him 3 of the feathered jigs. We went on home, and those folks went on fishing. Judge Green called the next morning. They wanted to know if, he said, I'd like to buy $25 worth of those, 25 of those jigs, 25 of those jigs that you were catching all those fish on. And I said, well, we don't make them. We're in the appliance business. We're not making lures at the present time. I said, if I made you one of those jigs, it'd cost you $1 a piece. Back then, $1 was quite a little money for a jig, especially a lead head jig. And he said, send me 25. He said, it's making a difference for $1 a piece or not. So I sent him 25.
After we sent the gentleman in Springfield those 25 that he ordered, we made up some more lures and went down to Bull Shoals again the next week, which was about the 1st of January, and caught another large string of fish on them. We brought those back and showed them on a local television show in Kansas City, and it created an interest with all the fishermen around there, and Sears and Roebuck asked us if we would make these lures for them. So we decided to call them Bass Busters at that time, and made up a bunch of them for them, and the popularity of them from there just grew out into other states and all over. So my dad went out pretty well full-time selling and promoting, fishing with guides, fishing with outdoor riders and so on, promoting the lures, and I stayed and did most of the manufacturing and run the manufacturing plant.
After the feather jig came the famous marabou jig and beetle spin.
One of our reps came in one day and asked us, said, would we be interested in selling the company, that Johnson Wax was interested in buying it. And of course that kind of surprised us, and we hadn't really thought about selling it. It had just grown so fast that we couldn't hardly keep up anyway, and they made us an offer on it, and we decided to go ahead and do that. And after we sold, I stayed and ran was general manager of the Bass Buster Company for a number of years after that.
Amsterdam is still the home of Bass Buster. It has the original plant and a new facility on the south side of town. Virgil's athletic abilities and competitive spirit have carried throughout his life. He played basketball until the age of 38 and baseball until he was 48. In competitive fishing, he won the 1958 Regional Bass Competition, the 1962 World Series of Sport Fishing, the 1964 National Championship of Freshwater Fishing, and the 1964 Outdoor Writers and Broadcasters National Fishing Tournament. Some of his first experiences with the electronic outdoor media was with Lloyd Presley, who had a local outdoor show in Springfield, Missouri.
TV was young in those days. And then along come Virgil with his bait company, and a great fisherman So I thought, wait a minute, I'm just a little duck, and this boy knows what he's talking about. So I got right a hold of his shirt tail and said, let's talk about this fishing.
It wasn't long before Virgil was going strong in the outdoor media with a column in 455 newspapers and a radio show on 200 stations. Winning the 1962 World Series of Sport Fishing was the catalyst to Virgil's television career.
So I did a lot of praying. And I flipped a coin. I said, Lord, should I go after white bass or black bass? It come up tails. That meant black bass. And I said, Lord, I want to win this tournament. The black bass aren't hitting in muddy water. So I said, 2 out of 3 times. And it came up tails every time. Now, if you don't think that convincing, it was to me. So the next morning, they all roared off but me. And I started out put along, and it's a guy, Illinois champion, turned around and looked at me and said, where are we going? I said, I don't know. I know he thought you're nuts. And we went along about a quarter of a mile, and I looked down a cove. It was about a half-mile long, and I saw some fish feeding. I thought, well, let's go down there and see. And at one spot, I caught my limit of black bass. I won 4 trophies in 5 days.
From 1963 to 64, Virgil hosted his first TV series with co-host Bud Iman for the Missouri Department of Conservation. The show aired on an NBC affiliate in Springfield, Missouri. At this same time, he taught a fishing class at Southwest Missouri State University. This was the springboard for his most famous accomplishment, the nationally syndicated Championship Fishing television show. He hosted the show for 25 years. In 21 of those years, he took the #1 rating for fishing shows, according to Nielsen and Arbitron rating services. In one of those years, the show placed #1 over 400 syndicated shows, one of Virgil's proudest achievements.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not bad.
We tried to produce a show that people would like. I mean, that was our aim, to produce as good a show as we possibly could. And we worked hard at it, many hours of the day. A lot of people say, oh boy, you got it made. You got all I have to do to make a living is fish, but it wasn't that way. It was a lot of work. And we worked from daylight till dark. When you got through doing your fishing, you had to take care of your equipment and get ready for the next day, and you're lucky if you got in bed by midnight.
Championship Fishing's longest-running sponsor was Bass Pro Shops.
Well, if you wanted to reach fishermen in this country, the Virgil Ward show was just about the best way to do that I can think of. Every fisherman in the country, or certainly many of them, watched his show every week and looked forward to it very much like the old American Sportsman series. So it was a great way to reach fishermen, and I think beyond that, it was important to us, as it was to all of Virgil's sponsors at the time, the value of his personal endorsement. If he felt good enough about your company or your product to endorse it personally, then that carried a tremendous amount of weight with fishermen too. So I think he was sought after. It was more not him trying to come and sell us, but us and other sponsors, I think, trying to win Virgil's support and favor to become one of his sponsors on the show.
Here's an interesting message from our sponsors, then we'll be right back.
Ranger Boats spent a lot of money buying 2 spots per show.
He was teaching people to fish. A lot of his program was how-to and of course a lot of where-to also. And he made a significant contribution to the sport of fishing through his television show, and we were just happy that he did and happy to be a part of it.
Well, if I can get him,
Some sponsors were more than sponsors, they were friends.
You know, I joined many, many people as being a tremendous fan of that man. He's just been a great inspiration to so many of us that enjoy fishing.
I tell you, these irrigation lakes have got some big bass in them if you can just catch them.
We just hardly ever failed to catch fish. We went to some good places, of course, but Virgil had the ability, he and Greg, to, as the tournament fishermen say, to pattern fish and to figure out a way to make it interesting and exciting. And every day is just a fun day to get up when you're with those people.
Virgil was started in the beginning, what I call the beginning of it, when we have new lakes in the country, and he kind of started all the modern day bass fishing back then when he first started, and when we first started, we didn't have trolling motors and things like that, so we paddled our own boats and this type thing. The first trip that I ever went out with Virgil doing a TV show, I was basketball coach then, and I guided on the weekends and in the summertime. Out of one trip on his TV show, it kept me busy and about 3 or 4 others busy for the rest of that year of people calling and wanting to go on guide trips because of his show. He was such a salesman, showing how bass fishing and any type fishing was, how good it was just to be out there.
One time we were fishing at one of the trout parks, and it was getting late in the year and the fishing was a little tough and the fish were small, and he said on one occasion if I would land this fish for him, he'd sure appreciate it. And I said sure, so I reached in my vest and I had a little minnow net. And so I landed this trout, which was about 6 inches long, with this minnow net. And he looks at it, it's on camera of course, and he says, "That's a minnow net." And I said, "Well, yes." And there for a moment, I didn't know what was going to happen, and he laughed. He says, "I think this is fantastic." And he put that in the show. And that began 25 years of friendship. And I really admire the man. He's such a gentleman.
Old Virgil, he's just a down-home fella, and he makes fishing interesting. He talks about it, and and you can tell that he loves fish. He loves life, and he makes it entertaining. And that's the reason I think for his longevity in the business.
There's a lot of exciting country just waiting to be explored. So join us now in the great outdoors.
The show took Virgil on travels throughout the world, many locations having breathtaking scenery.
When we got to go with him, it was it was a lot of fun. I feel like I got to do a lot of things that a lot of other kids didn't get to do. You know, got to see a lot of things and do a lot of things that a lot of girls my age didn't get to do. Enjoyed that, but he was gone a lot, and you know, we missed him.
Nestled under shrubs or in a rock.
Championship fishing often went beyond entertainment to educate the viewers.
Skin can be faded yellow-gray, blue-gray, or dark gray, or even brownish color, depending upon the terrain. There are more than 40 species of the fearsome tribe in the United States.
Get out of the way.
The western diamondback, found only in the Southwest, ranks as the #1 bad-tempered killer.
Then there are the mistakes. Some aired, and some didn't.
If you want to catch a limit of lunker trout, try it. Shoot. What's more, everything can go wrong to us when you're trying to make a commercial.
In 1972, Virgil wrote the Championship Fishing Guide.
It went well. I think we had maybe 50,000 copies to start with.
Bill and his son Greg have followed fishing careers as well. Bill remained working for Bassbuster until his retirement.
I was pretty content running the manufacturing, the lure company, and I really wasn't that enthused about getting in front of the camera. I wasn't that comfortable in front of it. I know my dad told me one time, he said, "You will never know how nervous and scared I was the first year I did that show."
Championship fishing was hosted for about 3 years by Greg Ward, who was groomed through the years for this position. But Greg discovered that hosting a nationally syndicated fishing show wasn't for him.
There was a lot of pressure. I mean, I loved the show, and I know what my granddad did when he went through with it. I mean, he worked day in and day out for it. I just considered him to be more into it than I was. He was competitive, and I'm not as competitive as he was. I don't really care about being famous. I don't want to be famous. I just soon just sit down here and go duck hunting, go goose hunting, and nobody know who I am.
Many professional anglers have been influenced by Virgil. One is Al Lindner.
You know, I remember the first time I met Virgil Ward. He was here in our hometown in Brainerd, Minnesota. He was in here doing a television shoot, and he gave me a call at our office and said, hey, can you help us find some walleyes on some of our local lakes? We want to promote walleye fishing in the state of Minnesota. Well, we went out on a lake that I had just recently been catching a lot of fish on called South Long, one of our area better walleye lakes. And in 4 hours' time, we caught a whole bunch of fish, if I recall, pushing up to about 7 pounds. A really good catch of fish. Virgil was impressed, packed his bags, headed back to Missouri or wherever else he was going for his next television shoot. After we finished that shoot, my brother Ron and I looked at each other and we said, hey, says, you know, we ought to start our own television show. So bingo, Virgil lit the fire. A few days later, we went and bought a camera, and we're in show business.
Throughout his life, there have been numerous honors. Virgil has been inducted into the Ozark Fishermen's Hall of Fame, the International Fishing Hall of Fame, and the National Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. In 1975, Missouri's Governor Christopher S. Bond proclaimed October 19 as Virgil Ward Day. Governor Bond said, "Virgil Ward, through his many efforts, has made an invaluable contribution to Missouri tourism and has made millions of Americans aware of the world of fishing." These days, Virgil likes fishing closer to home.
I got to the place where I don't fish unless I think I'm going to enjoy it. Used to, I'd fish in the rain, sleet, just about anything. I've had them hold canvases over the camera, and we'd still go ahead and film catching fish because we had to have a show. Well, I don't have to have one now, so I can pick the weather, I can pick the time of year and so on to fish, and I usually go when it's pleasant.
No matter where he fishes, you can still see the intensity and concentration being applied to the task at hand. Why was Virgil so popular?
Well, at the time, people weren't out and about like they were today. You didn't have television, VCRs, movies. You couldn't go rent a movie, River Runs Through It, if you want to see a good fly fishing scenery. And Virgil's about all that we had, really, that, in my opinion, that portrayed fishing the way it really was. It was down to earth. There weren't a lot of programs around like that. And he was just a perfect gentleman.
Virgil had the unique ability to communicate to the average fisherman, the average person that wanted to learn to fish. And Virgil knew how, and he looked at it as just a simple application of equipment and know-how. That's what made championship fishing popular and so successful, is the content of the show and the people doing the show.
You know I'm speaking for many of us that are fortunate enough to make a living producing and doing television fishing shows when I salute you, Virgil Ward, for your contribution to this segment of the sport. You truly were a pioneer that made it possible for all of us. God bless you, and thank you.
One of Virgil's younger grandchildren has a different view of his famous grandfather.
Oh, I don't really look at him as a celebrity, just as a grandpa and as a friend. He's my best friend.
As for Virgil's advice,
if you're one who likes to get out and enjoy nature, my advice is to leave things like they were, like God intended them. But if we don't turn a lot of them back, we're not going to have any fishing one of these days. A lot of pressure on these lakes. There's one.
Virgil Ward was a pioneer of many things. Two of the things that he taught us were the importance of catch and release and the proper way to dispose of our old fishing line. This was way before these two subjects were ever that popular. More importantly, Virgil is a great role model. He's one of the most decent and honest people I've ever met. We asked people why they thought Virgil was so popular. To me, it was his ability to pass this personality right through the television screen. And then if you had the opportunity to meet that man, you were meeting the same person. Thank you, Virgil, for making this a better world. It's now in our hands, so let's keep the world of Virgil Ward alive forever. I'm Dan Galusha. Thanks for tuning in.
So join us soon in the great outdoor world of Virgil Ward.